capstone for the EMPA, since we don't do an actual capstone project like the MPA does, is the course that Imani and I are currently in, which is called Leadership Confronted. And so this is a course that you will take in your last semester before you graduate. And sort of the goal of this course is really to look at your own leadership and how your challenges and how your own leadership impacts the decisions you make around work, how the systems that you work in and the structure that you work in impacts you. And it's really a look at how you're going to make incremental changes within your leadership abilities to sort of affect change in your own life. And that can be personal change and it can be professional change or a combination of the two. And so this class this semester, it's a really neat class. It's very different from any other class that I've taken here in the sense that it's a lot less around theory and it's a lot more around personal exploration. And it's around really looking at who you are, all the dimensions of yourself, having sort of these honest conversations with yourself around who you are to yourself, how you present yourself to others, how you are at work, how work interacts with you, and to sort of help you figure out those things that may be sort of getting in the way of you getting ahead, or those things that are actually facilitating you getting ahead. And we do, in that class, it's a very sort of open structured class of discussion. We do look at a little bit of theory, and we do some readings and talk about that a little bit, but it's really kind of taking these readings and taking it to the next level, and where we're sort of plucking out the metaphors and sort of a lot of how the theory actually is a metaphor for our lives in many ways. And there's a large project in this class where it's called the consultation project, and you act as a consultant to another EMPA student, and in turn, one of the other EMPA students in the class is your consultant. And we spend the semester working with our consultants in a variety of ways, which culminates in a non-traditional presentation at the end of the semester, in which we sort of appreciatively work with our consultant around their leadership challenge, and we present it back to them how we see it. And it's really a neat class because the teacher does not want the traditional PowerPoint. I mean, we're not allowed to use PowerPoint. We're not allowed to do any of that. So it's really about sort of non-traditional ways of presenting yourself. And so that's been a really exciting class to take, and we're going to be starting our presentations actually next week. And so I think it really ties in really well with all the different courses that we've taken too, and I think it really sort of stirs up things inside of you that makes you really think about yourself and sort of how all these different classes have impacted you, where you are now versus where you started 2 years ago, and sort of gives you a little bit of a launch pad for, okay, I'm graduating very soon, and like, what's next?
Seriously, it was a fabulous course, I think, I don't want to speak, of course, for Annalise, but at least for me, because I was able to, two things, really become more current on who are the leaders and successful leaders in nonprofit management and why, as well as understanding things that have really changed substantially in the field, whether it's corporate social responsibility or whether it's how social media is or is not successful for nonprofits. It's a really wonderful, I'd say, introduction into what is and can be effective strategic management, as well as, to some extent, some leadership. I think one of the highlights, in addition to some of the readings, and we're talking about the Heath brothers and Jim Collins and Beth Cantor, and these are all names of people who really you will become very familiar with as they are sort of the current thinking of what can be effective philanthropy, or what can be social leadership, or what's going on in the world of NGOs, et cetera. But for me, the other benefit was really my project group. I had the opportunity to work on a group for the UN, which was the UN Foundation, and that's very far afield from my background, as well as probably, you know, wherever I will end up. And yet it was fabulous because we had access to the people at the UN Foundation. It was, you're doing a live case study for, you're writing a strategy, a recommendation. And somebody in our class that David mentioned earlier, who is moving into arts management, well, they're using his strategic leadership project when he, as a part of, it's being implemented as part of the arts group that he's currently volunteering with. So everything we do, it's not in a vacuum, it's not, you know, in the classroom. I'd say it's much more reality-based, and I'd say, and it's really, you really feel like you're working on live cases. But for me, I'd say part of the biggest strength was just the different backgrounds of people in my classes that I have been able to really enjoy working with.
It had been a while since I had been in school, and it gave me, it reintroduced me to new concepts, like Margaret was saying, and I felt like it gave me an introduction to leadership frameworks that were maybe I'd seen in practice, but wasn't exposed to the theory behind it. So that was really useful, and it was a great way to start my introduction to Wagner.
For me, it's interesting. I looked at the strategic leadership as sort of a much more, it's very theoretical, but also very external for me in many ways. I felt like I was gaining information. I've become a fan of Jim Collins. He was so interesting. There were things that I sort of were against in some ways around in social services in different ways, and it was really a helpful kind of moment to take the time to really just sit and have the time just to gather as much information as possible. With this Leadership Confronted, I feel like a lot of it is very introspective. I feel we do a 360 leadership. I don't know if folks have ever done like a 360 leadership assessment of yourself, where you ask other people that have worked with you in whatever different capacity, whether in volunteer, work environments, what have you, to then do a questionnaire around your leadership ability and your style of leadership. And we just got that feedback back, and it was sort of really awesome to sort of hear or see how people saw my particular leadership abilities, but also, and it's also juxtaposing how you see yourself, you know, and I think that was really valuable information for me, but also just in the readings that we were doing, a lot of the readings are very introspective, really looking at your own, you know, emotional intelligence, your own, not just even leadership style, but what you value, your core values as a leader. So that's been a really wonderful way of, like, I guess, starting in the beginning to sort of externally kind of look at leadership and management in itself as a whole. And when you first come into the program, and then at the end, being able to sort of look like, well, how do I fit into this? And concretely, like, how do other people see me, and how do I see myself, and what does this mean in the next, you know, in the next places that I'm going in my life, and how I want to be as a leader.